it's shaykh to from you?
Yeah, both mills. No, not at all. I said that mamish. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Sure. Okay. Pleasure. More than okay. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Damai, Pei de Gimel Halachet Dalid, Daf Lamed. We're going to start from the top of the Amid, Rabbi Yirmiyah Boy Kumei Rab Ze'era, and let's quickly recap some of Halachet Dalid and the Gemara that we learned yesterday. So first of all, the Mishnah tells us, David Haltkop over here, that when a person brings their grain that they already tithed, a chaver, to a miller, if the miller, right, the grinder, the professional who turns it into flour, if the miller is a goy, Mishnah said, and there was no machlokes, that when he returns the flour to the owner of the grain, the flour now is the mai. Parenthetically, it's not that important for today's daf, but we mentioned yesterday that there is a machlokes what the meaning of the mai means here only in this Mishnah, because what are we afraid of, David? That the goy had his own grain. We're going with the opinion that even though the goy owned the land, that which grows is inherently obligated by it having trumas or ma'aser separated from it, but the goy is not mechoyev in mitzvahs. So going with the shita, that produce that is grown by a goy, that is brought to Gemar Malacha, is going to be mechuyev, to be tithed, and therefore it has a status of tevel. What are we afraid of? That the goy, we're going to use the word thievery, but it's not thievery like a ganef mamish. The goy is going to say to himself, what difference does it make whether the Jew is going to get flour from his grain, from my grain, same quality, same quantity, doesn't care about it. That's the chashash of the Mishnah. So therefore, maybe the flour came from the grain of the goy, maybe. And therefore, misafek, you have to be mafresh, we said everything, even Truma Gedoyah. Then the Mishnah went along and said that if a person asked a goy to be a custodian for his or her grain, for his or her flour, the goy also had their own flour. Shoymit, not a miller. There was a machlekes tanoim. The Tanakama holds that what the goy gives back to the Jew is tevel vadai. Wow. For sure, he how do you know he gave you back your grain, your flour? He gave you his. He exchanged it. Rab Shimon says also the mai. The Gemara asked, if you remember, that was the end of yesterday's share. I don't understand. Are we suspicious that the goy exchanges? Are we halachically certain that he exchanged? So the Gemara explained that the way people would give their grain to a miller, it would not be packaged. They would give it in a pile. When you give something in a pile, for the goy to think that he can give you the flour from the goy's pile, maybe his pile had less grain, it's not exact. You're not certain it's exact. So there's a greater level of hesitation by the goy to exchange it. That's by the miller. That's why l'kula alma, that which you get back, it's a problem. It's not yours for sure, but it's only the mai. Masha'enkin by a shomer, the way people would give things to a custodian. Think about it. You have things in a box, and like the Gabe pointed out clearly, that we're speaking about a generic box. It's like today when you go to the market, you buy flour in a bag. It's a standard bag. When you give something in a generic box, I have my box, you have your box, they have exactly the same amount. They look alike, they smell alike, it's all the same. So why wouldn't the guy exchange it? And therefore, the Tanakama holds that not the mai, maybe, he kept yours and he gave you his. That is where we left off. Today, first we're going to clarify more Bishitas Tanakama, that even though the Tanakama says the words Vadai Tevel, there are two ways of understanding Vadai Tevel. I know you can laugh, but that's the way it is. There's a Vadai Tevel only l'chomra, or it's Mamish Tevel even l'kula. I'll explain what that means in the beginning of the Gemara. And the Gemara is going to say that Tanakama holds it's Vadai Tevel even l'kula. That means that we are so suspect of the goy, the shomer, because think about it. It's a bag of flour, He mamish doesn't care. He's not, in his mind, he's doing nothing wrong. So we'll do it. Okay. After we clarify in Daf Lamed in the beginning, Shita of the Tanakama, we're going to speak a little bit about Rab Shimon, guys, because Rab Shimon in the Mishnah, even by the shomer, only gives the status of that which he returns as the mai. And let me say a few words that really should have been spoken out a few daf ago. And we'll speak it out now because it will be foundationally important to understand our sugya. Guys, it's the Gemara, the daf today, the way we have our pagination is very small in quantity, but it's very lumdish and it's very geshmak. But let me just give a little intro to a certain concept. Guys, if I have tevel and I have tevel, even though it's not in the same pile, I am allowed to be toidim or mafresh from one pile on the other. I know that there are details that by truma it has to be minamukaf. I can be mafresh from one pile on the other. Now I want to ask you guys a question to think. We never spoke it out. If I have two piles of demai, can I separate from one on the other? I know we spoke earlier in the Masechta about I was taking off my sedation from one on the other, and it's not 10%, it's 11.1%. That was by something that's tevel gomer. No meiser was taken off. The bottom line will be there's a machloikis about it. We're going to follow our sugya, and this won't be the only time it's going to come up. Like the Marafulda, one of the main Mefarshim on our Amid, that the mai and the mai is not allowed to be done. Can I tell you why? I'll tell you why. Very simple. Because what's the mai? We said this from Daf Aleph. If the mai would have been viewed as a normal rabbinic obligation, so then of course why not? I can't be toidim or mafresh min al ptur al achiv or min achiv al ptur, but it's the same level of chiyuv. The rabbanan. We don't look at it that way. Even after the Chachamim were goyzed, the mai, we viewed the mai as a doubtful separation. A doubtful separation means that if I have pile A and I'm audits, the mai, I have pile B, the mai, maybe Aleph had everything separated and B not, or vice versa. Maybe I'm doing menachiv al aptur, rabtur al achiv. So whenever you have one pile, one quantity, one container of the mai, you have to be toidim or mafresh from it, on it, and not from something else on it. However, here's the chiddush. Having said that, guys, let's remember that we do have rabbinic tevel, not the mai, rabbinic tevel, right? There are certain items that midoraisa b'chlal don't have to be tied. Midrabanan, they do have to be tied. It makes a lot of sense if you think about it. One is allowed to separate the demai separations from rabbinic tevel on behalf of the mai. So you could separate trumas meiser from a pile of tevel midrabanan on behalf of the demai. That is something that you are allowed to do, and we're going to bring it up when we learn the shir to see how gavaldik is that piece of information going to be for our sugya. Now, when we speak about this suspicion or le tanakama by a shomer, the vadai, that the goy will exchange, there is one more thing you have to know. That if I gave a goy, let's say, one saw of flour for him to be my shomer over, and we know objectively that the goy has his own saw of his flour, that is where the Tanakama says that he exchanged it. That is where Rab Shimon says he might have exchanged it. Because we know that he had a saw. What happens if we know the goy has a saw, but I gave him 100 saw? The 100 saw is going to be tevel or demai. How? No one is suspicious that the goy is going to buy something that's not tevel and exchange it with wine. That's not what we're being chayish over here. So based on that, there's going to be very gavaldic scenarios. What happens if you have 100 people, though? 100 people. Each one gives the goy one saw. The goy only has his own one saw. So when do we say that when you get them all back together, only one of the 100, now we don't know which one, I know that, but only one is the mai, Rab Shimon, or one is tevel l'tanakama. And when do we say each and every one is tevel or demai? Like we're going to have such cases today. If you remember the today Shvilin, but this is a classic case that we learn a lot in the Babli, that if you have two roads and one road has buried underneath it a mace, in a way that whoever walked on that road for sure was mahil, became an oil over the mace, one or the other. And we have the rule, remember, Safik, Tuma, Bereshus Harabim, you can be lenient, Tahar. So if two people walked, Reuven on the path number one, Shimon on path number two, one of them became Tameh, it makes a big difference whether if they come to ask together, are we Tameh? Then we're going to say you're both Tameh. Versus if they come, since you're ruling each one separately, both of them will be told Tahar. We're going to have a very similar case today with more cases. Okay, that is a good sikkum, I hope, of that. That's a good sikkum of Daf Lamed. Now let's go learn this inside. So, Nachamal, we just finished explaining that the reason why the Tanakama by the Shomer, by the Goy, says that what he gives back to you is Tevel, not the Mai, because it's given in a box, and therefore it's so easy for the Goy to make an exchange with the Goy's thinkings that it's the same, because it's the same amount, for sure it happened. Now, Rabbi Yirmiyah asked, guys on top of the Amid, what are we saying, Tevel? Ma keperois of mamish. Is it Tevel, even lekula? What would be the kula of saying something is Tevel? Whether pointed Tevel barur b'makamachet. Right? We just mentioned this in another context, but we just mentioned the rule that you cannot be toidem min aptur al chiyuv, min achiv al aptur. What happens if the Yid who got back from this goyish shomer his saw box of what the Mishnah says, what the Tanakama says is Tevel? What happens if he has another saw of Tevel? If we're going to understand Tevel, even Lekula, it's 100% Tevel, then if he wants, he can be mafresh from one on the other, because they're both mamish Tevel. But if we will understand that even the Tanakama, that doesn't say Demai, he says L'chumra Tevel. What would be the nafkamina if it's Demai, Danny, or Tevel L'chumra? What would you think will be the nafkamina? You have to mamish halkov. But let's say, before I'll give you the nafkamina, that if it's only Tevel L'chumra, but not L'kula, it's not mamish Tevel, then you cannot be Tredem Mafresh from this type of Tevel, that's only Tevel L'chumra, for something that's Tevel fully. Because they're not the same obligation. Now hold on. If you're saying there's something called Tevel, but only L'chumra, isn't that Demai? There's a doubt. The answer is no. Because look inside the Rashidilio, 3 lines from the top of the right side. Kiperois of mamish, is it mamish even lekula, and therefore pointed tevel bar b'makamachin, which means the yachal hafresh mizeh al tevel barur midoiraisa ula patroi. And we're going to learn more details about this tomorrow on Daf Lamed Aleph. Dilma, like Rabbi Yechanan tomorrow, ukeperois of the ka'amar. What does it mean that it's tevel like the goyish produce? Hainu the chayavin b'chulu maisis, that you have to separate everything. Truma gedola, maiser rishon, maiser sheni, the noisin lebalayim, and here ve'eino noitel damim min hashevet. Here we go. So let me say, what does it mean? Eino noitel damim min hashevet. We learned by maiser rishon. Do you have to take off maiser rishon from the mai? So we said yes and no. Yes and no means that you have to take off maiser rishon to take from it trumas maiser. But the maiser rishon, since there is a doubt, you get to keep because of hamoitzi mechavein olavarayim. And if the Levi wants it, let him pay for it. No, that's yours. Tevel l'chumra would mean that you have to separate the trumas umaisis. You have to give the truma gedoyla. We said, well, let's go with the mai. In our Mishnah means that, like Rab Shimon, the mai doesn't mean what it means. It means you have to separate everything misafek, but you charge for the truma gedoyla. That's what the mai would mean. You get it then? You have to separate it, but you get to charge. I know that the coin is going to pay a lesser amount of money because truma is less expensive than chulin, because there's less demand. Anything that has less demand automatically becomes less expensive. That's what it means. Tevel, the mai means not even the Mai means that the Mai in our Mishnah, you have to separate Truma Gedoyla, but you charge the coin for it. Tevel L'chumra means you have to give it to him. You can't charge for it. But still, we're saying we don't know for sure that it's Tevel. If I have a pile of real Tevel and I have this that the guy gave back to me, even though the Tanakama says the words Tevel, maybe I will not be allowed to be Toidim or Mafresh from one on the other. To the Chiyuv.
You're saying maybe, or we're saying for sure? What are we saying right now?
We're saying, is it for sure Tevel, like even Lakula? Or is it only Tevel L'chumra?
Got it.
I just wanted to speak out the Rashadilio. If you think about Tevel L'chumra, so how is it different than Demai? The difference is that in the Demai of our Mishnah, learning Demai the way we learned Darayvit in our Mishnah, that you have to separate. And you have to even separate Truma Gedoyla, but you charge the coin for it. You get money for it. Because it's only a suffix. You can't eat it, but you have the right to charge for it. Tevel L'chumra means you can't charge for it. But again, it doesn't mean that we're saying it's Tevel like your other Tevel. So which one is it? So Amalei, Rab Zera responded that even L'kula, Ulachol Deva. It's an interesting expression. In other words, Ulachol Asher Ba. Some people have that gears. It's mamish considered Tevel because we are trying to introduce a new splitting of the hair that we never had before. Until now, we have either Demai or Tevel. And furthermore, the law al Yos Havarab Chanina Masris Lekavel Rabbi Acha. The word Masris, a tris, which is a shield, is an expression that Chazal use when two Chachamim are debating each other. Just like Rabbi Yirmiyah asked the question in front of Rabbi Ze'eda is reminding him that the same question was asked by Rabbi Chanina to Rabbi Acha, as we have in Yerushalmi Avodah Zarah. And just like over there, it was unequivocal, this question, that when the Chachamim, the Tanakama here says that by a shoyman, not by the miller, we suspect, vadai, not suspect, we halachically say the goy gave you the goy's flour, therefore it's tevel gam. There's no such a thing as tevel l'chumra. It's either demai or it's tevel. In other words, the Chachamim hold. Now, do we know in actuality whether it happened? That's not the point. It means halachically the Chachamim are saying it's not something that we suspect. It's something that we paskin, that the goy gave you back his flour. And therefore it's tevel, gomur, even lakula. I can take this flour, if I have in my house another pile of flour, and instead of separating here each one for each other, I can be toidem or mafresh everything from this one that I got back from the goy for what I have in my house. It's not min aptur al achiyuv, it's min achiyuv al achiyuv legamre. Finish. So that is the shita of the Tanakam. Then we have even by the Shomer, Rab Shimon argues. Rab Shimon holds that it's the Mai. Okay. And like I mentioned right now, then Halkop, these are little nuances. That the Mai in our Mishnah doesn't mean what it means in Masechtas Demai. Masechtas Demai, the Mai obliges the owner of the Demai to separate only two things. Trumas Meiser, and give it to a kohen, of course, not to charge, and Meiser Sheni, but to eat it in Yerushalmi. In our Mishnah, we're going to go with the Pshat, that the Mai means that you have to even separate Truma Gedoyla, but like we just mentioned, Danny, you separate Truma Gedoyla, and you would get, but you sell it to a kohen. It's called Noitel Damim. Okay, I just want to point that out there. Now, the coin won't pay us. Why will the coin buy from you? Because the coin is going to pay for your Truma Gedoyla less money that he would have to pay in the market when he buys Chulin, because Chulin is more expensive. There's still a benefit to the coin over here, but just to make it clear, that sheet is Rab Shimon. Now, first statement, and based on it, we're going to really expand our brains. Rab Chia Barbun, in the name, the Shem Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina. Loi Amar Rab Shimon Elo Kedei Kupas Oi. Like we spoke out in the introduction. Yes, Rab Shimon is saying Demai But remember another layer of leniency that we have to apply to the Mishnah. That if the case is the owner, the Jew, who deposited, and let me use my example of one saw by a custodian who's a goy, whom we know already owns an equal amount in his possession. In other words, we have to know.
It's about the amount.
Yeah. In other words, we're using the word a box.
1 kilo.
Today it's 5 pounds. In other words, if we know I gave him 5 pounds for him to guard, if he owned his own 5 pounds, that's the whole discussion over here. And we're saying the Tanakama, Vadai, he gave me, it's the goys, it's Tevel, or Rav Shimon says no, Damai. We don't know, maybe mine, maybe his. But that's only because we know that the goy owned in his possession already at least the amount that I deposited, which made it shaykh for him to exchange it.
At least or only?
Own it.
Well, at least or only?
I'm saying at least. But in other words, just the last line here in the Amid, Hifkoi Eitzel Shtayim. What happens if the Jew gave the goy 2 boxes, 2 bags? The goy only had 1 bag. No one is saying that we have to be suspect that the goy some point got another bag and gave me 2 bags of goyish flour, which will be according to our sugya, even though some people will disagree with this whole topic because they'll hold that if it grew under the farmer a goy, it's bechlal not mechoyev in maisus. We're not going with that. We're going that it's mechoyev in maisus, but the goy is patim and mitzvah, so it was not taken. Hifkod etzel shtayim. Then turning to the aflam and omid beis, this is very important. And now the goy gave back to the owner. The custodian gave back 2. How much could he have exchanged? That's the point he's trying to make. He didn't get new ones, only 1. So achaz damai va'achaz vadai. We don't suspect that he obtained produce elsewhere. That's the key over here. Okay. And now 1 second. That's why I spoke out my intro. And now what? See, the Gemara is so mekatzet. Okay, now. So now, guys, this is important. I have 2 bags. One of them, when the Gemara says the words vadai, what does it mean vadai? Just to make it clear. Not vadai tevel, the opposite.
It's good.
I know, because you can get confused. Vadai here means one is good. Because I'm a chaver, I gave him already mesukin. So if I get back and I have 2 bags and I don't know which one is which, what do I need to do?
One is questionable, one is for sure.
One is the mai, and one is good. What happened? What do I do with that? Then, now what do I do with that? So remember, I spoke at him. So to say that you can take off from 1 bag and say like Mimon Shach, right? That if it's for here, it's for here. If it's for there, it's for there. That you cannot do. Why not? I just want to speak it out. I know it's not that negaya, but it's the way it is, because you cannot be toidim umafresh from a pile on. No, more than that. First of all, you can't be toidim umafresh from the mai and the mai, but you for sure cannot be toidim alachiv alabtur abzur alachiv. Forget about my whole introduction. What are you going to do? You can't take it from here. You don't. If this is already mesuken, I cannot take it to Muslimais. You cannot take it from another pile of the mai. That's what I was getting to. Because there is a rule that I cannot be toidim umafresh from 1 pile of the mai for another pile of the mai. Compounded with, this is a different type of the mai. So what do we do over here, Danny? That's the key. You get tevel midrabanan. Tevel vadai midrabanan. And there are many cases for that, without getting into it right now. And then you say you're mafresh it. I gave to the goy box A, box B. I got back box A, box B. The Gemara is telling me over here, only one of them is the mai. Rab Shimon. I take now box C, which is tevel midrabanan, and I declare that I know that either A or B has to give whatever it has to give. I'm taking it off from tevel midrabanan. That's the way you resolve it. The point is that I only have to take off 1, not for 2. 1 second. Now, a minute. When do we say that? Only big kayamois. Only when I have both boxes. They're both be'en, they're both here, they're both kayam. Abel, what happens? Im nechlo harishoinam. Hashniya demai. You have to appreciate this by reading the top marafuldam. Mamish at the end of the top line. Avlam nechlo harishoinam hashniya demai. What is Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina trying to tell us? Rishoina, he oisa shehifkid etzloi b'rishoina, shehi nechneses yoiser b'safik mashniya. First of all, if a guy is going to exchange, is there a probability, guys, not a certainty, is there a probability as to which one of the two he exchanged? Yes, that will be important for the next few lines in the Gemara. We suspect, thank you, Dan, that if an exchange happened, when was there, think about, what would you say? When do you think there's a greater likelihood for an exchange to happen? By the first. Not certainty, likelihood. In other words, if the custodian doesn't care about this type of honesty,
I remember he's a kuti, what is it?
a goy, not a kuti, a goy dafka. A kuti is different. So, first of all, we give a probability that if he is an exchanger, aganif, he'll do it right away. And he only had one. That means if he exchanged the one, then what would you say about the second? Second is good. He only had one. So even though there is such a probability, let's just leave it aside.
Even if he exchanged the second one, he's just giving you yours back on yours.
Yeah.
How do you know he only has one?
That's a kasha. That's in the case where we know. Okay, now one second. There is a logic, not vadai, probability, then nevertheless, it's not a certainty. Because Dilma what he's trying to add is that if the first one was already consumed, don't say the first one was the demai, was the goys, or L'Rab Shimon, Safek goys. And therefore, now that we paskened on the top line of the summit, achas demai va'achas vadai, the second one is probably vadai. If the first one doesn't exist, there's nothing I need to do. We don't say that. Even if the first one was eaten up, everything that we're saying will be a step to chap the next step. So remember this concept. We are acknowledging that there is a probability that the problem of the mai was of the first. Let's speak all it up, Shimon. Achas, the mai va'achas vadai. I know that. Nevertheless, now, if I have both, who cares where it is? I have to take a third pile of tevel midarabanan and separate everything on behalf to wherever there is the problem. If I ate up the first, I shouldn't have, but I ate it up. I cannot say, well, I already did the isur, and now the second one is probably my original one. We don't say that. We have an issue with the mind. However, now let's go weiter. Now this is all Rabbi Barbun. Not lu mimenu meyo b'nei adam meyo sa'in basachas. Now, not one person. The guy only has one saw, and we already established that we don't suspect him to get more. 100 Jews, each one had one saw, all asked the same guy for him to be the custodian. We just established that even if the guy is an exchanger, he doesn't care. Even though the probability will be is that he exchanged it the first, but it's not a certainty. That means that now when each one of the 100 picks up, even though if I gave him 2, David, and he gave me back 2, how many of the 2 are problematic? Only one. Only one, not 2. Only one. But if 100, that's because it's all me. It's the same owner. I don't know which one. But if 100 people gave him, so Babas Achas, really the Babas Achas, I want you to know, is not that they gave it to him at the same time. Even if they deposited each one the saw at a different time, what is important is that they picked it up together. They picked it up at the same time. What do we say? Kol echad v'yechad mesaken demai. Everyone has the issue with demai. Now, why? Yeah. Because everyone doesn't know whether maybe the guy exchanged mine. Why does it make a difference whether they picked it up at Basachas or not? L'mayin afkemina. Because that's the Trei Shvilin that we spoke out. Yeah.
So 100 people go one by one.
Not one by one. They deposit it one by one, and they all come at the same time and they pick it up.
They come at one time and all pick up.
Yeah. Then the halacha will be everyone's is L'Rab Shimon Demai. L'Tanakama, everyone's will be Tevel. Why? The guy only had one box. Trei Shvilin. You have two paths. Under one, there's a corpse buried. In a way that whoever walked on that path from here to there, for sure, went over the corpse. We don't know under which path. Two Jews, one went on path one went on path two. Reuven and Shimon. They both want to go into the Beis HaMikdash. We do have a rule that when there is a doubt of Tumah, in Rishus HaRabim, we can be lenient. We are lenient. If they come together to a basin and they ask the basin, what are we? What is our status? The basin will tell them, you're both Tamei. Only one is Tamei. Yeah, but one for sure is Tamei. So when we give a ruling, depends what we look at when we give the ruling. If we're looking at both, we can't say Tahor. We don't know which one is Tamei. We have to say both are Tamei. If they would come to the basin and ask separately, am I Tamei? Basin will tell the Reuven, you're Tahor. Safek Tamei, B'Rishus HaRabim Tahor. Shimon comes, they will say Tahor. Even though you can ask, how can they both be Tahor? That's the way it works. That's the meaning over here, that if not Lumimenu Me'ah B'nei Adam Babas Achas, if you want to look inside the Gemara Fulda, we can just read 3 lines under the Gemara. In middle, it's Divrei HaMaschal, not Lu, just the word V'davke Shenat Lu Babas Achas, says the Gemara Fulda. That's where we say every single one's is the Mai. Everyone's. I want to say, if everyone, if they would have picked it up separately, see, they're not going in front of a basin here. But when I pick it up, that is where I have to make the ruling. When I pick it up, I can say, what are you talking about? Right. There's 99 are good. Mine is good.
Why don't you say kol kavua k'mefsa mefsa dummy?
Because
if you're going into the guy's place and you're taking it out from there.
Very good. I would say, Danny, because it's an Isur D'Rabbanan, that's why we're only saying on Rab Shimon, because he says it's Demai. Maybe L'Tana Kama, you're right. I like what you're saying. This whole sugya is taka only Rab Shimon. It's a big difference between an Isur D'Rais and Isur D'Rabbanan. Danny, a Safek Isur D'Rabbanan 50-50 is L'Kula. No, I'm being lenient because I have what to be toilet. If they all pick it up together, then a judgment is made at that time. One of you guys, then we have to be machmer.
And what does that mean that you're being machmer? That means all 100 people have demai instead of
every single person has to treat what he got back from the custodian demai. It's amazing. No, it's if I, Danny, have 2 saw and then I give it to the guy and I pick it up.
It's not the regular demai. This is our special demai that we're talking about.
But let's say if I would own 100 saw, I would own and I would give it to the guy. And I pick it up together. I know that in one of the 100 there's the mai. But since it's 100 separate people, here all of the 100 is the mai. And even if now, even if these 100 sold what they had to one person, so now it belongs to one person. If the problem would have happened when it would have been owned by one person, we would have said only one of the 100 is the mai, only one. But since when we paskin, it belonged to 100 people, doesn't help. Kvaniru Leo is the Mai. They already became established as the Mai. This is dense. Now, 1 second. Well, let's go on the contrast. Now, let's go. Let's just pick it up. 1 person deposited his or hers 100 song. And again, it wasn't that they gave it the basachas. The key is not, I can give it one at a time. I can give it over a period of time. It's about me picking it up. That's the key. But I picked it up together. That's the whole word. Like we said before. So what do we say? Now listen to this. Now we're going to another detail.
First?
Yes.
Just one?
Yes.
Sorry, is it?
Let's read inside the Gemara folder. You have to read this 50 lines under the Gemara. See, now that's why we mentioned before about this probability, that there is a probability that the exchange happened at the first. That's the Mara folder. Now, then another detail. Why did we say on top of the Amud, guys, achas demai va'achas vadai? We didn't say how to shoyna demai. We didn't say how to shoyna demai. We said one of the two. We don't even know which one. Here we're saying if I gave 100, I don't have an issue of I don't know which one. Only one. Which one? The first one. Why? The first one that I got back. When I pick it up, the first one that I took back. This is important. Why? Because here it's not 1 and 1 equal. Here there's a roiv. And by isurei derabanan, we go after probability. Everything is a nuance here. Since the whole issue is the mai, that means it's an isur derabanan over here. And you have a bittul b'roiv. Not the first case of the Amis where the Gemara says achas demai va'achas vadai. That's because there's only two. It's 50-50. Then he had a good question about kavua. I don't. So maybe I take back what I told him. But since you have over here 100 means even 3. Here, not only is it only 1, that's for sure. We already said it. But now, because of the probability that if a goy is an exchanger, he would have done it right away. So I can not only say only 1, I can even establish which one. That's what the Manafuld is saying. Good. Huge chidushim here. Back in the Gemara. And now let's take it to the next step. What happens if I go now and I sell it to 100 different people? Same thing like we had before. Once we already paskened, in this case, leniently, it doesn't get ruined because it went to other people. The son of Bnei Adam, then Niru, Leois, Vadai. Wow.
Why is in the second case the Shar Vadai? The rest, the other 99?
Because we say, first of all, if it belongs to one person, we're not going to say everyone is a problem. We only say that when everyone has to judge for themselves. But now we're going to the other nuance that was the top marafullah that we learned, that if a goy is an exchanger, there's a probability he did it right away. We can even give it over here because you have these numbers of bittul beroiv, because there's a tremendous amount of vadai. 1 and 1, we say, I don't know which one is vadai. I don't know which one. If you ate up one, then we say, oh, you ate up one. The other one is the mine. 1 and 1. Once you have the 100, then we say the first one is the demai.
Yeah, but why are the rest vadai?
Because we already began, the whole sugya began that if a guy only had, we know objectively, one saw, then we never suspect that he got more. He only exchanged what he had. He only had 1. He didn't have 100. He could not have exchanged it. There's no 100 tevel here. There's only 1. If he exchanged it, the guy remains with 1. Is even if he exchanged it, there's only 1. It's great. Now 1 second. The Hatani b'shem Rab Shimon b'shem Rabbi Tarfin that asu peiros Yisrael zeh ke peiros goy zeh demai. Says the Marafulda, this is important. 4 lines from the bottom. Hatani b'shem Rab Shimon v'chulei. Also, Pedro Isha Zevachule, Hai Lishna, this expression, Mashma, called Pedro Shivkid Etzloi. This we're not going into the detail, which is amazing. We're going to the premise, David, that if the guy only, we know that he only has 1 kupa, then the max problem is with 1 kupa. But the words were that Asu Pedros Yisrael Zek Pedros Goy Zedamai. It sounds like that if you give it to a custodian, what you get back is all problematic. Lit up Shimon Demai. But the Bryce, this statement, the Bryce that's being quoted, doesn't sound like we're saying only 1. It sounds like all of them The Gemara says no. Well, fine, even though the Brisa doesn't say this way or that way. Oy he Amar Shimon ela ad kedei kupasai. No, we are insisting the sugya of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Chanina is not an argument with this brisa. He can't, and he's not. This brisa, we're speaking about Chitas Rabbi Shimon. When we're speaking about Demai, that's the gear. So we have that it's Demai. So this is the brisa of Rabbi Shimon. It's a given that it's only up until the amount that the goy had. How do we know that? We know that somehow objectively. Look inside the second to last line of Manafolda. That's that it's only at kedei kupasei ka'amar v'suloi. No, because you can say maybe first of all, like David is asking a practical question. How do you know what the guy has? And maybe when someone was in his house, maybe afterwards he went to the market. We don't say that because we don't yesh l'davar soif. If we know he had a bag and you get this, we say that. So we learned big things today. These are big details. 2, you get back 1, only 1. We don't know which one. To the point that if you ate up the first, the second one is the mai, because we don't know vadai the first is the mai. But that's because you gave 2. The moment you gave 100, and he gave you back the 100, doesn't matter. That's the case. The 100 was for the other side of it, that if 100 separate people gave it 100, all of them have the mai. Since they picked it up together, it's like the Trei Shvilin where everyone asked the halacha together. These are good halachas. Just know when people learn smicha, a lot of smicha, the taruva is like this. Yeah, the same type of logic. Yeah. Halacha l'maisa, we're learning Gemara. No, but these are good nuances. Here we're learning that when you have an Isur D'Rabbanan, I have to still think about Danny's question about Kavua. Maybe they speak about it here in the bottom. He's saying that B'chlal, why would there be a difference between 100 and 2 when it's Kavua? Yeah, you don't have right. Here we're differentiating between 2 versus 100. And we're saying by 100 that since biblically it's batal, which is saying that's how it works. But midrabanan, we're saying there's a problem. Since the problem is only midrabanan, we are allowed to follow the probability. Look at the logic that the goy exchanged the first.
Rabbi, and just to clarify,
yeah,
the entire morning that you use the term demai, we're not talking about regular demai. This is our own special demai of our Mishnah
of halacha dalid,
which is Suffolk Tevel, basically.
Suffolk Tevel, and again, what that means is, Danny, very good. Normally, demai means that if I own demai, I have to separate trumas meiser and gift it to a kohen and meiser sheni and deal with it myself. This demai means that since it might be from a goy, might be the suffix that nothing was tithed. I have to separate truma gedoyla, but I get to sell it to a coin. Remember that for tomorrow. I get to sell it for a coin. I separate my sedition, and my sedition has no kedusha. That's different. So my sedition, I get to keep. It's a whole different law. Azoi. My suffix.
And
because that we have a reason to say you did the first. That's why that part is important.
Because it's not kavua. It's not kavua.
When you have targum sitting there, right?
When you have Isur D'Oraisa, we don't go this. That's a big rule of today's stuff. When you have Isur D'Oraisa, we don't say maybe he probably exchanged it first. The whole problem was only with Rabbanon, and therefore we say.
It's hard to say. It's the first one.
First one.
And that takes away from that. It's not
when you find, in other words, when I find something on the street, Danny, and I don't know from which store, it could have come from each one equally. Then we say, call punishment over punish. When I bought it in the store, I don't remember in which store I bought it. That's the kavua. The suffix, but there's no logic of one more than the other. I just don't remember which. Since the suffix was born in the makim kavua, halacha. Let's go that it's a chayk. Let's go that it's via. Here we're saying there's a problem. Why? Because the goy exchange. Okay, you don't know that. Let's say since this is a chashash midrabanan, if he's an exchanger, if he's a cheater, he cheated right away. If he had in his mind to exchange, he would have done it right away.